Hello everyone, and welcome to this video featuring my washing machine, where I will talk a little bit more about how to buy a house. And to be fully upfront, I'm kind of making these videos as I go through the process myself, and I learn things about the process. So I believe that there will be a part 3 to this at some point after I close on my house, which I hope will be soon. So the first things that I wanted to add to the original part 1 was some stuff about mortgages. Um, Mortgages have closing costs, and these costs include just like a lending fee, and then some other stuff on the list here, like there's an appraisal, some things like that. And the closing costs can be impacted by whether or not you do any credits or points on your loan. And credits are basically just like you're increasing your loan's interest rate a little bit to lower your closing costs so you don't have to pay as much up front. And a closing cost is separate from down payment. They're totally separate entities. Points then are the reverse of credits. So points, you're basically just saying I'll pay more upfront to lower my interest rate from a base interest rate, whatever that is for you. Right now, I think under 3% is very typical, but I don't know how long it'll stay that way or how long it has been that way. So, credits increase your interest rate to lower the upfront cost. Points increase the upfront cost to lower the interest rate, is the idea. And which of those makes sense depends on how long you expect to be in the specific mortgage, right? Are you going to buy a new house in 3 years so that you not only do you not really care to get into points and increase your upfront cost, but you actively want to lower it using credits, maybe. And as far as I can tell, at least, every lender treats these two things a little bit differently. So, in my case, the break-even point on the number of credits that I decided to go with ended up meaning that it was like 8.5 years. So if I'm in the house I'm buying for more than 8 years, I will start to lose money on the increased interest rate versus the lower upfront cost. And that math isn't especially challenging to do, and usually your lender will help you with it if you are confused yourself, and they'll explain how they did it, and you can verify that it makes sense. Then I'm going to skip account records for a second. The appraisal. That's basically just the bank saying, I want to double check that this loan is actually worth, or this house is actually worth what we are borrowing to you, or at least close, right? Because they don't want to give you $500,000 for an $80,000 house, right? So that's the bank trying to cover themselves. However, that cost gets forwarded to you, which is awesome because in the current housing market, the bank's appraiser will basically just rubber stamp anything as long as it's not stupid, like the example that I gave you. So my house, I maybe bought slightly above what would have been market value, and I could have been more patient and maybe done a little bit better, or things could have gotten so much worse, right? It's just the game that it's just whatever how you're willing to play the game, but the point is that the appraiser didn't come in and say, oh, he was $1,000 off, so that would send us back to negotiating with the seller, in my case. They just said, yeah, close enough, and signed off on it for the value that I was taking, or for the value that I paid. And additionally, banks can sell your loans. I believe they're obligated by law to tell you it's either within it's either 30 days before or within 30 days of selling your loan. I don't know exactly the laws, but they can sell your loan to another company, and how afraid you are of that depends on who you are, right? So, going back to account records, this, guys, I messed up. Guys, gals, all other categories, everybody, I messed up. So, I've been told that this is because of the financial crisis in the, pre 2010 era. But banks want to be able to verify the a lot of information on any accounts that you're going to use to pay your closing cost or down payment. And they'll ask for 2 or 3 months of statements. And I messed up because if you have any large transactions, for example, I was preparing for this house purchase and I had 3 different investment accounts, including cryptocurrency, that I pulled part out of so that I could, pay the down payment, right, and not lose it while waiting for the closing date. But that meant that because I had substantial deposits in that bank account, oh, and a savings. I also withdrew from a savings account to put in a checking account that should hopefully be easier to work with once closing time comes. But that meant that I'm getting tired just thinking about it. That meant that because I had these large deposits, they also needed information on those accounts and how I was using those accounts and what they were for. So instead of having to give 3 statements, I had to give like 15 statements for a variety of different accounts. And then there was one account, the cryptocurrency one, didn't have real classic looking statements. So I basically just had to ask my lender what they wanted and how to handle that. And fortunately, they came back telling me that it was okay. I had other assets, so they would let it slide. But that was a mistake. I created a huge mess for myself. And it's okay, right? They're kind of used to it, so you can do the same thing probably with any lender, but you should at least be more prepared for it than I was. And then, so here's the purchase agreement. This is basically the few sheets of paper you sign when you're buying the house. And I'm not going to talk about these in order. The first I'm going to talk about is earnest money. This is basically like a security deposit on a car. This is basically you saying, giving some amount of money to an account where you can say, or that gets held onto until closing, so that if you back out without cause before that date, I think it's the seller gets that money. So what that means basically is, like, if you put a security deposit down on a car and you say, nah, I don't feel like it, you might just not get that money back at all. Or the dealer might say, yeah, it's okay, we'll give you the money back. But the general idea of that is that you're basically just using money to promise the seller that you're serious. So then, the closing date is fairly obvious. That's theoretically the date that you'll end up with keys in your hands. Sometimes it happens, the actual physical key transfer happens before or after this date, depending on your situation. But if you're going through realtors and stuff, this is usually the day. And that's usually the time you do all of your final paperwork. I haven't experienced this yet. Then your purchase agreement will have some of your mortgage information on it. So who you're planning to go through, how much you're planning to put down in terms of a percentage, or I think my specific purchase agreement was reversed, so it was the maximum loan percentage versus down payment. So instead of like 10% down, it said 90% loan rate. And um, then it'll say also who you're lending it from, and it's very common to change that. That's not a commitment. It's not written in stone. You can just It's called an amendment. You can amend your mortgage information. In my case, I had like 5 days to amend it without needing any real approval. And I think even now I could amend it if I wanted. Um, but that depends a little bit more on the details of your purchase agreement, because a lot of these will have timelines. So the earnest money to be collected in X number of days, mortgage information to be finalized in X number of days, or just X number of days to freely change it, or amendments can be made by mutual agreement for X number of days. There's all sorts of interesting things in purchase agreements, and what yours looks like depends very highly on where you are and what kind of market you're in. So now I'm going to talk about the inspection, and this is one that in my housing market got to be very interesting, because inspections can be quite a hassle for the seller, particularly after like we had a major storm last summer. Well, we're closing in on, I guess it's been like 8 or 10 months or something. But we had a very major storm, and that did an enormous amount of damage to some houses. And if you can't afford the deductible or something on your insurance claim, you may just try to let it ride, right? Like if your house looks right, but it's like shifted an inch on its foundation or something, you may just pretend you don't know when you go to sell. And in a hot house market where the sellers have the advantage, it's fairly common for buyers to not get a full home inspection done as part of the purchase agreement, like as contingent on buying the house. So there are 3 kind of major options here. One is to get the inspection and have the purchase be contingent. So if you find something in the inspection that you don't like, you have the full right to tell the seller, hey, fix this. You can also get an inspection that is not contingent. So that basically means if you find something that you really, really don't like, you can back out of the deal, but that's pretty much it. And depending on why you're backing out, I'm not sure if you get your earnest money back or not. So then you can also just totally skip the inspection. And in a very hot market, there's lots of people doing that. There was one house that I looked at that ended up having 30 offers, and at the time, I was going to put an offer in for the house, but it ended up with 30 offers, and my realtor said, hey, I really think to write a competitive offer here, you're going to have to skip the inspection and go way over asking. And I was okay going over asking because everyone I talked to agreed it was worth more than they were asking for it, but I didn't want to skip an inspection on a 50-year-old house where some of the floors were crooked. And the floors being crooked could be vaguely innocent or an absolute catastrophe. And it's hard to tell as a layperson, right? It's hard to tell as somebody without experience if it's really bad or not. So you kind of want that inspection in that case because you believe that there's something wrong. And you do anyway just to play it safe as a buyer, right? Because compared to the value you get out of an inspection, it doesn't cost too much. But there's also a lot of middle ground on these. So you can get different parts inspected. For example, we had a terrible storm. So I wanted to get the roof inspected, and maybe I could have had the attic inspected as well to see the rafters, but I decided to forgo that. I only did the roof. because my house was so new, I couldn't find any evidence of water damage anywhere, and the seller's disclosure, which I haven't mentioned yet, basically their list of things, right? It tells you a ton of details about the property history as well as what they're leaving in the house, what they're keeping for appliances and stuff. But the seller's disclosure for my house was extremely detailed. And I had seen a ton of seller's disclosures by this point, and it was the most detailed one I had ever seen. And they were very upfront about some damage from the storm that still needed to be fixed, and they had a quote and everything all ready to go for that. And it's just hard for them to find parts right now, house boom, blah blah blah, major storm, blah blah blah. So what I did was I skipped a lot of the inspection stuff. I only did the roof. I didn't do the basement or electrical or plumbing, or I checked some of these things myself in the house because I know how to during my initial walkthrough, but I didn't go really deep like you would during an inspection. I just had the roof inspected for two reasons. One, it's hard for me to get at during a walkthrough, and two, I don't really know what I'm looking at with a roof, right? I can do basic electrical stuff, but roofs are out of my league, right? If the roof is missing, I can be pretty confident that something is wrong. But if there's minor flaws with shingles or little areas where water can easily get in, or maybe evidence that 10,000 bats have been in and out of your attic at some point during its life, and there's stuff like that I don't know how to identify any of that. So for me, it was worth skipping a lot of the inspection because I can do some parts myself that are most likely to be wrong. But also, because it was such a new house and it made my offer look better in a very competitive market. And I'm not saying I recommend that anybody follow my footsteps there. You have to do what you're comfortable with, and if you're on the fence, just get the damn thing inspected and don't worry about it, or try to. And if they reject your offer, then who cares? But in my case, I was willing to forego that. So now at least a situation where I felt comfortable doing that. And we'll see if I pay the price at a later date, right? You never know. We could find something really drastically wrong that an inspection would have caught. Now, again, on a house the age of the one I'm buying, I would be a little bit surprised, but it could happen. So maybe I'll end up paying very dearly for this decision. I think that's all I'm going to talk about in this one. You can go so deep into like the math of credits or points in the mortgages, or what different things, different parts of inspections cover, or different types of plumbing to watch out for. Like there's all sorts of stuff, but I think I'm gonna skip most of that. And probably never do a video. So if anybody wants me to deep dive on a particular topic, feel free to mention it in the comments. Otherwise, I will see you guys in the next one.